Ahoy friends, welcome to Building the Alpha Dory. I'm Dan and this is a project to build a Chamberlain style racing dory from John Gardner's The Dory Book, illustrations by Sam Manning. Today we'll be out in the yard and the shop finishing up the stay set. We're going to be making up the forestay. So first thing we've got to do is measure that, and we'll also be measuring for the mast step. Let's get out there and get to it. Alright, so we've got the boat outside the shop, of course, back from the landing. We headed down rowing for a couple of days. And so what I'm going to do is set up the mast for a minute, and we'll make sure that the mast step cuts that we need to make are in the proper place. And we're also going to measure for the forestay, which we have yet to make up. So yeah, let's do that. We'll put the mast up. You can see I've got this rope on it, which allows me to pretty much put it up with one hand. This rope captures the base of the mast and lets me push up against something. Then when the side stays come tight, which I've got tied off at about the right length, when the side stays come tight, and I'll give the mast a little push forward just to tighten these up a bit. And then we can get a feel for where the forestay has got to be. And I'll just for the moment we're actually gonna put a cleat on the rail over here. But just for the moment I'll run the forestay to the cleat that will hold the jib. If I can get out without tipping the boat off the wheels. So yeah, there we have it with the mast up. You can see the stays can still get shorter there, so we're not maxed out on the stay length. And yeah, I've just taken a magic marker and marked the minimum length here on the stay. So this is about as far forward as we'd want the mast tipped. So the forestay can be about that long. And then I'll mark the top of the mast where the thimble's gonna go, and that'll pretty much do it for the stay length measurement. Oh, and then I've also checked where the foot of the mast comes and marked for the tenon that goes into the mast step. And I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't too far forward or too far back, so that the mast will be in a good spot versus the seat. Okay, so first thing, let's cut that mast step to fit. there's one side of the tenon cut. Checking the depth there. Now we want to make this deep enough where the mast won't ever jump out of the step, you know, going over waves or whatever. But we also don't need to go crazy on the depth here either, because that'll just make it harder to get the mast into the step. So I'm rounding the edges of that as the mortise is rounded in the boat. Now I'll just clean it up with the fine file to make a half round. There we go. There's a half round there. And now we'll do the same on the back side. Knock the edges off here so that we don't get pressure right on the edge of the grain, which could splinter out a bit. Also, that way we don't have any sharp edges of the mast bearing on the step. Get a nice even distribution of the down forces from the stays to the step. I'm just breaking this angle. There's a nice rounded shape to that. And that mortise we're going to is is oval, so this will fit into it pretty perfect. All right, well, I'll hit that with a little varnish and we're good to go with the mast base. All right, next thing is the forestay. Alright, so first step to making up the forestay is the eye splice at the head of the rig, which will be up the mast. And first step to making that is countersinking countersinking the ferrule, which will go on the I-splice. And after I've countersunk it, I'll just clean out any little burrs that may be in there with a file. Just clean out the countersink to make sure that there won't be anything that catches on the wire as this is sliding over the splice. And of course, whenever we're splicing wire, safety first. So put the safety goggles on. And then I've got the wire here, which if you watched my previous episode about Danish splicing, this is 7x7. And we want this loop at least as big as the loops for the shrouds. If it's a little bit bigger, so much the better. So I think I'll bring it down to about here, which is about an inch longer than the splice we already did for either one of the shrouds. So once I've got that measured to where I want it, I'll get a little wrap of electrical tape on there to mark the spot for me. I've got plenty of wire. I've already measured this for what I'm doing, so that's not an issue. It's not like I'm trying to make this I-splice smaller or something so that I'll have enough wire to make the whole thing. Alright, and then I'll take my ferrule with the countersink up, facing where the splice is going to be. Thread that on and bring it right down hard onto the tape. And so we'll splice right up to where the ferrule is, pretty much. So what I want to do is clamp the wire to be spliced in my rigging vise. Okay, now the Danish splice is very simple. 3 of the 7 strands three in a row, one after the other. They've got to be side by each. Keep them twisted together on their own. Three of the strands unwind right down to where the splice is going to end. So the full length of the splice gets unwound. This is probably going to be a dozen, 15 winds or so for this long of a splice. Okay, so we're right down to the ferrule. Now I take these, take either one. Here's the 7 strand, doesn't matter which is in what hand. Here's the 3 strand. Overlap them back on each other, and just bring them down to where the splice is going to end. Then join the wires back together. So you're going to start wrapping the wires as they were, as they laid previous. So wrap one side and then wrap the other. And try not, be careful of the ends. These ends are why you're wearing the goggles. But also you got to be careful of the ends because you don't want to fray the individual wires. The 7 that are by 7, so it's 7 tiny wires making up 7 strands of wire which are wound into the wire rope. So you don't want to separate the tiny 7 from their individual components. You know what I mean? Alright, and then I'll wrap the other side. And I'm just laying the wire back in on itself. It just kind of does this on its own, more or less. You can feel it fitting right back into where it's missing the strands. And it'll lay in there nice because the 3 that are missing from the 4 are going into the 4, and the 4 that are missing from the 3 are going into the 3. Alright, so you can see I'm right back down to the joint here. This is where the splice is coming together. Now I'll take this ferrule that I've routed out and opened up so that the wires will fit. And I'll bring this ferrule back up over the sharp ends of the wire. You got to make sure that they're all laying in there all the way to get this ferrule over them. There goes. Make sure you're not pushing any wires up with it. Oops, I am. I got one little stray wire that's not going in. Okay, I just pushed it down, and now it's going in. So like I say, take your time with that, and careful you don't poke yourself coming out the other side. When those wires just start to think about emerging on the other side, then you've gone as far up as you want to go. You can see the splices starting to appear right here. So now what we'll do is we'll grab our crimps and we'll get the appropriate opening, which is the 332s, 332nds. That's the gauge wire we're using. And we'll center this right on the ferrule, right on the crimp. then crimp it tight, and then open it up. And you can see that's crimped down nice and tight. It's actually warm from the pressure. And we've covered the sharp ends and locked that splice right into position. We'll whip this with some friction tape, and it's onto the other end to make the other end of the stay. Alright, so I've measured this out on the bench, 11 foot 5 inches. The previous, the shrouds we made up, previous stays we made up were 11 inches. This is 11 foot 5. So I'm measuring from the same distance down the bench, and I'm at 11 foot 5. And then what I'm going to do is bring it back to the 11 foot mark, because I want a 5-inch overlap on this splice. I'm going to mark that, and then I'll mark the apex of the bend approximately. You know, we'll let the wire decide actually where it is in the splice, but so there we go. Now I know where to cut the wire back at the vise. So I explained in the last video, if you've got a really nice wire cutter at your house, then at your place of business, then that's probably the way to go. But if you don't, then this is about the best way to cut a wire. Just really clamp it tight in the block. And when you stop cutting metal, then you're through the wire. And usually you come out with a pretty decent cut, not too frayed. You can see there that that's a pretty fairly good quality cut. Alright, so this is the piece that we're going to be splicing. I will countersink the other ferrule, and then we'll get to it. Alright, so I've got the end of the splice marked. I've got the ferrule on there with the countersunk end facing where we're going to make the Danish splice. So I'll position the wire in the clamp just at the point where we're going to end the splice. And now, just like on the last one, I'll pick up 1, 2, 3, wires. 3 of the 7 wires. So there's 3, got 3. So there's 3, there's 6 wires around the outside, and then there's a core wire. So the core wire stays in one, doesn't matter which. You know, you're picking out 3, so the core wire will stay behind with the 4. And then just unspin them right down to the tape where you want the splice to end. So we'll go to there. All right, you can spin them back. It's not a big deal. The big thing you got to watch out for is the ends of these wires. You don't want to fray the individual, the 7x7. So then bend these down and around to measure your splice. And then with them bent, bring the wires together with them, while you're doing the measuring. Once you've got them in place, bring the wires together and then bring around this is the 3 that I've got now. I'm wrapping the 3 around the 4. And I'm being careful of the wire ends, that I don't fray and splinter them outward. Okay, I'm down to the end of that. I'm down to the junction of the splice there. So I'm having to bend this wire back a little bit to get it through, to keep from hitting the wire ends on the other side of the wire. Okay, so there's the junction right there, right? Now what we'll do is I'll take off the tape, and then I'll bring the ferrule up and over the splice we just made. Make sure you're not pushing any individual strands back along the splice, which is why you have to be careful when you're bringing the ends through, because that's when the individual strands will get separated from the rest of the... Okay, so I can feel a strand down here, so I've gone too far with the ferrule. I want to bring it back down along the splice a little ways, so that I cover those sharp strands. There, we're good now. So I'll position this in the jaws of the crimp, and we'll crimp the ferrule. I'm centering it. There we go. You can see we centered the crimp right in the middle of that. And there's the loop. Now the next thing to do is to get the thimble into the thimble crimped onto the wire. So to do that, I'll just put the thimble in the tip of the crimps, and I'll squeeze down on it. And I'll squeeze down on it to close the thimble. So I'll position it here. There we go. Make sure the The clamps you've got are small enough to fit between the wire and the crimp. And then I'll just use the ends of the crimp here to crimp down on the thimble where it goes, just gently where it goes, connects with the wire. And then we'll be able to tape over all of that with the friction tape. And even though you're crimping this down on the wire, this thimble will still find its the center, center itself on the lowest spot on the wire, just as pressure is applied to it in the sailing. There we go. It's kind of annoying how it jumps like that, but it is what it is. So, I got the clamp as best I can at the moment. You kind of need 3 hands to do this sometimes. Alright, and then, like I was saying, we'll just go over everything here with the friction tape. And we'll be good to go. I'll bring it back once I've taped it up. Alright, and there we have the finished eye splice there with the tape and the other end here, which is the loop that goes over the mast, and this is now taped up. I can take off the electrical tape now that we're done with the splicing. That was just a marker. So yeah, there we go. The forestay is finished. We should be able to rig our little vessel now. Ready for sail. Thanks so much for dropping by Building the Alpha Dory. Massive thank you to everyone who's liked, subscribed, and supported the channel. And yeah, thanks to everybody who showed up for our launch day as well. Looking forward to seeing everybody next video and out on the water sometime soon. Have a great day and God bless.